Hello boys and girls. If you're watching this video today, that means that you missed our lesson yesterday on gathering information or research. So today you're going to be taking notes on this topic in your notebook. Please make sure that you have your journal out in front of you, that you're open to a new page in your science section, and that you are ready to take notes. Why is it important to gather research? When doing a scientific experiment, after you figure out what your testable question is going to be, your next step is to always gather some research or some information. It's so important to gather your information because you need to be well informed about your topic. This helps you create a hypothesis or an educated guess. You can't make an educated guess if you haven't educated yourself about the topic. Below I have an image here. These are the 4 things that you need to look for when evaluating your research. You might have taken the time to sit down and look up some information about your topic. How do you know it's the correct information? Please make sure you have these 4 things written down in your notebook. First, does the information relate to the testable question? Obviously, if you're looking up information about your project, it needs to relate to what you're actually looking for. You'll notice in a minute when we start critiquing other people's research that although you might be writing about the topic, you're not specifically focused on what your question is. So it's always important to make sure that it's directly related to the testable question. 2, will the information help scientists in making a good prediction or hypothesis? Just like we talked about, your research is supposed to inform you so that you can make an educated guess. If it kind of goes with the first one, if it's not directly related to the testable question, then it's not going to help you make a hypothesis. 3, are some of the statements better than others? Which ones are best suited to the experiment and why? You might find that while you're looking for information, that you find a couple of really good pieces of information, and then you also might find that you just are finding random facts about your project. Again, it goes back to the first question. Does your information directly relate to your testable question? And 4, what, if anything, should the scientist research before continuing with his or her experiment? It's always important to take a step back after you finish researching so that you can figure out what else you need to look up before you continue on with your experiment. If you need to pause the video so that you can make sure you have these 4 questions down, please make sure you do so now. Okay, now that we know our 4 questions to look for when being evaluative of our research, we're going to use this checklist in order to critique another scientist. So on this checklist, you are looking to see if the research is good, okay, or poor. If the research is good, that means it follows these guidelines. It relates to the testable question, is specific and detailed, and it shows that the scientist has enough knowledge to experiment on the topic. If the research is just okay, that means that some of the statements are just related to the topic, but not to the specific testable question. It also might be that it needs a little bit more research in order to get to know enough to conduct a good experiment. Now, if the research is poor, that means that the statements are too general or simple, they don't support the question, and that they don't really have a good understanding of the topic. They probably should do some better research before beginning their experiment. Okay, so here's our first scientist. This first scientist's testable question says, will the amount of air pressure in a basketball impact how high it bounces? Take a moment, pause the video, and read the information that this student has gathered on their testable question. After reading this information, look back to your critic's clipboard and judge this information. Is it good research, okay research, or poor research? When you're finished, replay the video to find out what I think the research is. Now that you've paused the video and you've evaluated the research, let's talk about it. The research in this experiment, I think, is pretty good. The bladder is part of the basketball that holds the air and gives it bounce. It's made of butyl rubber and shaped like a balloon. I think this piece of research really directly relates to the question, because the question is asking us, does the amount of air pressure in a basketball impact how high it bounces? Now, I do think that at the end, towards the end part of their research down here, where it starts talking about NBA regulations, I do think that the person gets off a little bit off topic here. So I would say that although this scientist, their research relates to the testable question, I think that they need a little bit more research in order to get to conduct a good experiment. So I'd say they're probably in between good and okay. All right, let's look at our next scientist. This next scientist testable question says, which food substances attract garden snails the fastest? Pause the video, read this scientist's information, and then use the critic's clipboard to figure out if his experiment or if his research is good, okay, or poor. Now that you've paused the video and figured out which of these evaluations this scientist's information is, let's talk about it. I think this scientist has poor research. The reason why I think this scientist has poor research is because although the first statement that they have in their information is slightly related to the testable question, I think the rest of the information is very off topic. Snails moving very slowly, snails hibernating during the winter, and how long snails can live really don't have anything to do with food substances that attract snails. So I definitely think that the statements are too general and that the scientist does not show a good understanding of the topic. If they wanted to fix their research, I think that they could add some more information about what food substances snails enjoy, and maybe they eat or that they are attracted to. I think that's what's missing in this experiment. All right, for our final piece of research that we have here, this scientist testable question says, does the brightness of light impact how many moths it attracts? You know the deal. Pause the video, read the information, and then critique this scientist using the evaluation good, okay, or poor. All right, now that you've figured it out, let's talk about it. I think that this scientist has good research. I think that all of the statements directly relate to the testable question, and even the scientist went ahead and figured out why moths even are attracted to light and why their bodies automatically go to that because of the light sensors in their eyes. I think they also did a really good job defining those scientific vocabulary words, talking about what the reaction to the light is called, that phototaxis. So I definitely think that this scientist, their research relates to the testable question. It's specific and detailed, and I think that it shows that this scientist has enough knowledge to experiment on the topic.